The Beasts of Satan, the now infamous cult of Satanism from Milan, Italy, responsible for 3 confirmed horrific murder cases over the course of 6 years, and many more that cannot be 100% proven. Before we really get into this, I want to just post a disclaimer to the spirits of these victims. While I discuss this subject, I hold firm a total respect and give my condolences to their lives and future achievements lost. No disrespect was intended when producing this video. When watching this video, reflect on the gift of life and how fragile it really is. This case is extremely graphic and dark, so if sensitive to themes of murder and suicide, I would suggest clicking off the video. Another disclaimer, nearly every piece of information on this case essentially alludes to the fact that these young people's mind were corrupted into Satanism from death metal. Admittedly, occult and Satanist subjects are quite common within death metal, but not to be taken at a literal sense. This was the work of twisted minds of a few twisted drug-dealing, drug-taking people, not the music. Also remember, Italy is arguably the highest authority of Christianity in the world, so death metal would be found quite offensive anyway, so it's a very easy link for Italians to make. Also, apologies for sometimes my poor pronunciation of the Italian names. I'm just a bit of a slow person in that department. It's January the 17th, 1998, around 11 PM. Michel Tollis receives a call from his 16-year-old son that he will not be returning home that night. His son Fabio Tollis is at his usual drinking venue called The Midnight. This is also where the members of a band called Circus of Satan drink regularly. He stated he was going to sleep at his girlfriend's house that night and didn't want to come home. His father Michel did not deem this as appropriate, as Fabio had told his father his girlfriend was only 16. Michel did not want to upset or offend her parents since she was, so young, so he asked Fabio to come home. In reality, Fabio's girlfriend Chiara was actually 19. Michel actually instantly recognised the shaky, hesitant voice from his mumbling son, who normally speaks with a lot of confidence. Thinking he might have had a beer too many, or maybe consumed some drugs, he was worried enough that he got dressed and drove 30 minutes to The Midnight to collect him, just to make sure he got home safely, just to make sure he was just okay. He arrives at The Midnight to be told by his son's friends that he had left with his girlfriend a while ago. One of the friends, who is now also worried, joins Michel for a car ride, going to the most obvious places they could think of. Michel even gets Chiara's home phone number and calls her parents, asks if they made it home to their house since that's where they told Michel they were going to. Unfortunately, Chiara's mother said that neither of them had turned up. Not knowing where to look next, Michel decides to head home. Besides, this isn't the first time a young boy has been cheeky and stayed out the night with a girl. He's still worried, but he's not at panicking level. He obviously checks his son's room to see if he had returned home while he was actually out searching, and he had not. But hopefully he would turn up the next day in the morning. Unfortunately, Michel can't sleep for a single minute. Fabio's mother actually worried him even more. Her mothering instincts instantly decided that some foul play had happened here. He actually got ready to drive to Chiara's house first thing in the morning. Upon arriving at Chiara's house, her parents are now worried as well, as neither of them returned there. Now it was time to go to the police. The police seemed unfazed by this behaviour. Obviously it was nothing new, like I said, for a young couple of lovers to disappear for a night or two. Especially when they are young and their parents object to them sleeping over each other's house. The police told Michel to calm down, stop thinking the worst. Besides, you can't create a missing persons case until 48 hours after the disappearance. There was nothing the police could do at this point. Michel was still really worried, even though the police tried to calm him down. He decided to get the phone numbers of the whole Circus of Satan band members, who he believed were Fabio's friends. One thing he noticed instantly is that every single member told him the exact same story, down to the last detail. Every single detail was exactly the same. The story was, Fabio and his girlfriend Chiara left to use the phone next door, as punters aren't allowed to use the phone within The Midnight. and it was this that they never returned from. The friends don't know where they went after that. Michelle and the band actually organised a search the following day, and this is where Michelle would meet Volpe and Sapone. Keep those two names in mind, because Volpe and Sapone play big parts in this case. So Volpe and Sapone were actually big drug addicts. They were also key members of the band, and they were actually known to vandalise and ransack graveyards to acquire props for their performances. Obviously, this is horrendously wrong, but over time, they actually influenced and pressured the other members into doing antisocial things like this. Eventually, though, they would persuade the whole band to form a satanic cult. Obviously, Michelle Tollis did not know any of this information when going for this search. So the search that the band did with Michelle turned up nothing, so it had now been 48 hours and Michelle was able to file a missing persons case. Since Fabio was a minor, the police had to launch an investigation. So Chiara's disappearance was investigated purely as it was connected to Fabio, as she was not actually a minor, contrary to what Michelle previously believed. However, the police did not take this seriously. They did not conduct a thorough investigation. Michelle states that they never even investigated Fabio's room, or even asked Michelle many questions about Fabio. Michelle actually took it upon himself to take some of Fabio's belongings into the police station and write out statements of information, maybe Fabio's traits, how Fabio possibly might think, even though the police did not request it and, to be honest, did not use it. They did, however, search Chiara's room. What the police found was disturbing to them. It was an altar worshipping Satan, inverted crosses across the walls, and satanic symbols everywhere. While Chiara is obviously a Satanist, or at least involved in the occult, the police were not worried about it. They had no reason to believe that this indicated something tragic could have happened. Although the police might have felt uncomfortable in the room, there was nothing criminal happening here. For the police, this case was closed. A young 16-year-old boy and a 19-year-old girl being together was not really accepted, so instead the lovers ran away. Police are adamant that if the parents of both the young people be patient, it is more than likely one of them will receive contact at some point. It is when Michelle heard of what was found in Chiara's room, his mindset changed dramatically. He started aiming his own investigations at death metal bands and bars, visiting the places Fabio would go, and one by one interrogating the members of the Circus of Satan. He soon learns that most people who hang out at the heavy metal bars are members of Satanism. But again, every single band member said the exact same story, word for word, as if they had made it up. Unfortunately, with next to no help coming from the police, nothing would surface for the next 6 years, making this a cold case. It was on the 24th of January 2004, 6 years later, that Summer Lombardo police received a phone call from a business owner first thing in the morning. A man who looked out of his face on drugs was wandering the streets talking to himself. Police quickly dispatched, and once they arrived, they approached the man, and he is visibly upset. He's very distressed and very obviously on a lot of drugs. They ask him to calm down and show his identification. This man is Andre Volpe, one of the names I asked you to remember very well. Andre Volpe was one of the more prominent people of the satanic cult within the Circus of Satan. Volpe immediately admits to the police he is on a cocktail of hardcore drugs, including cocaine and heroin, and maybe some meth just for good measure. Volpe starts telling the story to the police about how he was driving with his girlfriend, Elizabeth Bellerin, following in a separate car. Unfortunately, he had to swerve in the road to avoid something, and after this he looked up and his girlfriend was nowhere to be seen. This was a huge lie. In fact, what happened was that Volpe's girlfriend had overdosed in the car he was driving, and he had run away from the car panicking. Police decided to send Volpe to the hospital along with his overdosed girlfriend. When Elizabeth wakes up, she is still under the influence of drugs and only semi-conscious. However, she starts raving about blood and sacrifice, starts to scare the nurses with very disturbing things relating to Satanism. The nurses also gather something bad happened at the cottage Elizabeth and Andre both currently live at. Andre Volpe is well known to the authorities already. He's an unemployed drug addict, and the police suspected him of a long time of actually being a drug dealer. It's discovered that the car Andre Volpe was driving did not actually belong to him. It belonged to the mother of a young lady called Mariangela Pizzotta. So I think I butchered that first name, so for the rest of the video I will be calling her Pizzotta. The mother was informed it was in the possession of Andre Volpe and immediately panicked. You see, Andre was actually her daughter's old boyfriend and was in a relationship with him for years. Even though they had been broken apart for a while, the two ex-lovers continued to see each other, and Pizzotta would even consistently loan money to Andre to help with his debts. So this obviously raised alarm bells that something was not quite right, as the previous day Pizzotta had asked to borrow the vehicle to visit some of her friends. The police immediately go and search the cottage Andre and his girlfriend lived at, while other police went and arrested Andre at the hospital. Upon arriving, they are shocked as it looks decayed and abandoned. Once inside, they described it like someone had broken in. All the furniture was broken or turned upside down. The place was also disgusting with mouldy food everywhere. It clearly had not been cleaned for months. The only thing that was kept well or alive in this place was a tank with a boa constrictor snake inside. However, so far, nothing maybe incriminating. Suspected traces of drugs, but nothing too serious. They go into the garden, however, where a greenhouse stands. As they enter the greenhouse, they find something shocking. The body of Pizzotta was discovered. Buried under a small mound of dirt, the couple had done such a bad job that her hands and feet were still visible, sticking out the surface. Even more disturbing to the officers on scene, the body was still warm. After Andre Volpe is arrested, he starts blabbling immediately, just spewing all kinds of shit. His first false story was he was showing off a family heirloom, a gun that had been passed down through his family, you know, like a World War II heirloom. And it accidentally fired into Pizzotta's throat. The couple did not think the authorities would believe this story, so they alone buried the body. However, evidence showed there was a third individual at the cottage helping with the body. It was shown in bloody footprints outside. And even Elisabetta's version of events taken at the hospital contradicted many details. So he comes up with a new version of events, in which him and Pizzotta are supposed to be celebrating her birthday with a friendly meal, but an argument broke out. He supposedly got the gun out to simply scare her and stop the argument, and that's when he accidentally shot her in the throat. Not knowing what to do, he calls the head of his satanic group, Sapone. Remember Sapone? I told you to remember him. Sapone turns up and ridicules him, saying, "You can't even kill a girl." At which point Elisabetta is actually still very much breathing and just suffering alive on the floor. This is supposedly when Sapone and Volpe move her to the greenhouse, where Sapone picks up a shovel and tries to finish her off. Sapone then apparently leaves, telling Andre to ditch her car in a river. However, police pretty much already had a picture-perfect version of events in their heads, and they obviously didn't believe this was an accident. The only thing they did not know was the motive behind what this murder was. This is when a certain individual sees this case reported on the news. This individual is Michel Tollis. Michel Tollis heard Andre Volpe's name and his heart dropped. You see, for the last 6 years, Michel had been investigating, gathering evidence and data on the satanic groups of Italy, never giving up hope. He had gathered information on their rituals, and more importantly, gathered evidence on the Circle of Satan band members. Still adamant they are responsible for the disappearance of his son. He has a very solid theory suggesting that Pizzotta was killed to stop her leaking any information about these satanic group activities. He organises a meeting with a sergeant from the force, and once he reveals all his information, the sergeant is speechless, absolutely shocked at how much work and evidence Mr. Tollis had gathered over the years. This is when the police now bring in Sapone for questioning around his involvement. On the contrary to Volpe, Sapone swears blindly he did not have anything to do with it. That he actually got a call from Andre to come to the cottage, and when he got there, there was a girl already dead on the floor, in which he immediately left and wanted nothing to do with it. Also, Elisabetta, who is still in the hospital, has now changed her statement, saying she remembers nothing of the night, even though her previous statements are filled with lots of incriminating details. I couldn't find any information on whether coming out of a overdose caused coma and only being semi-conscious affects the statement, but in general this would obviously affect the statement. You know, you can't take what she's saying as real. But it was thanks to Michelle's highly detailed evidence that the police launched an intelligence investigation against the satanic group. On the 17th of May 2004, on the advice of his lawyer, Andre Volpe confesses everything to the police. He confesses Fabio Tollis and Fabio's girlfriend's death, given the exact location of their bodies. He confesses that Pizzotta's murder was deliberate. Not only that, but in fact Sapone, the cult leader, had actually ordered the murder to happen, and it not be an accident. He also pins a large number of other homicides on the satanic group. It is here that the police learn that this satanic group is called the Beasts of Satan, the hidden name for it. He gave a complete list with every single member of the cult. So now we go back to the disappearance of Fabio and Chiara. At the time, Chiara was the only woman in the Beasts of Satan, and nearly instantly fell in love with the younger Fabio as soon as he joined. She had been saying openly she wanted more normality in her life, and she found that in Fabio. The leaders of the Beast of Satan hated this. Not only did Fabio not deserve her, but this meant she was distancing herself from the group. The rest of the cult on that night of the disappearance had already prepared their grave in the woods, telling them that they need to come to do a ritual with them. This was the meaning for Fabio's phone call to his father. Fabio actually sensed something was wrong and told the group that he needed to go home. This is when they forced him to make the call. Fabio and Chiara's relationship was not a good fit for the group, and since they would properly distance themselves, they needed to get rid of them. Fabio and Chiara are driven to the forest, and as soon as they step out the vehicle, Sapone starts stabbing Chiara. Sapone starts stabbing Chiara. Volpe joins Sapone in the stabbing, and as Fabio tries to intervene, he is bashed over the head with a hammer by Marco Macchione. His skull was essentially caved in. Fabio was 6'2" and 220 pounds. He was actually able to put up a defence for some time. This is known from the 64 different knife marks on his body. But eventually he was overpowered and his throat was slit. Imagine the horror and trauma of even 60 seconds of multiple people trying to kill you. It's incomprehensible. And yet poor Fabio most likely had to deal with several minutes of this. Two young lovers were thrown in the grave and revoltingly urinated on by the group. After buried, Sapone danced on top of the grave, chanting something like, "You're zombies now. Try to get out of this hole if you dare." Hard to comprehend people with such little empathy. This wasn't an act of emotion. This wasn't an accident. This was pure pleasure. They returned the next day to drench the grave in a chemical so animals would not smell the corpses and dig them up. Andre Volpe accused the others in the cult of the following murders, however none could be proven, some of which are former members who the cult are thought to have pressured into committing suicide. Now on to the court cases and sentencings. The judge residing over these cases stated these individuals were not driven to kill by Satanism, and appeared to actually know very little about the occult or Satanism. These murders were committed by the weak minds of immature, twisted people, with no compass of morality. Obviously their horrendous drug addictions made it easier for these people to deal with. The sentencing for each member is as follows. Andre Volpe was sentenced to 30 years imprisonment. However, because of his confessions and cooperation that led to the arrests of everyone involved, it was lessened to 20 years. Pietro was imprisoned to 16 years. The judge was extremely lenient as he was a minor when the offence was committed. Sapone, being the leader of the group and having heavy evidence he was the mastermind behind all the killings, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Leone, Marco Zampolo, Eros and Elisabetta were sentenced between 24 and 26 years for their roles in all 3 murders. This whole situation caused widespread panic across Italy over fears of a strong satanic presence, the Pope even authorising 5,000 holy men to be taught skills in demonic exorcism.